did the same thing with our house.
Okay, so let's go back here a little bit. Good afternoon, and welcome. Thank you for being here. Kim Wolf, Environmental Services Director for Douglas County in the Omaha area. I wear a number of different hats. Today, I'm going to be specifically talking about AI and battery energy storage systems. And you may ask, well, why are we talking about this? Well, the short answer is that Judy and a couple other folks said, hey, we're starting to get inquiries about battery energy storage systems. And by the way, this artificial intelligence thing, what's going on with that and so on. So I put together some things here. I will tell you, I reached out to a lot of different folks for resources, and I intend this to be somewhat interactive, but also just informative. You've got questions anytime during the next hour and a half. Please wave your hand, get my attention. And I'm probably going to repeat the question because, again, part of this is we want to get the AI transcript to be as accurate as possible. So think about that as I'm going through stuff. Think about questions that you can ask, because the AI assistant is listening to that and trying to formulate a summary of the meeting based on what it's hearing. So the better you do with asking questions, the better the transcript is. And I'll talk about some examples of how that can be used. Sure. That's a question. There we go. Now. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, just again, disclosure, and this is something, if you're not doing as part of your public meetings, if you are recording it in any sense, whether it's just an audio, whether it's video, or whatever, you need to let people in the room know about this. This helps protect you legally from liability on that. So rather than you having to take a bunch of scrambling notes and so on and so forth, I put together this QR code. QR code has my contact information, but more importantly, it'll have a copy of the slide deck, and it has a copy of some other resources that I will reference during the afternoon session. So go ahead and I have this at the very end of the presentation as well. So you'll be able to look there. And Sherry, I know it didn't work. It didn't work last night. I got rid of that idiotic logo in the middle, and now it works. Yeah. Anyway, everybody got that? Just another minute. Again, I'll have that at the very end as well. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different types of AI, artificial intelligence. And I'm going to go back a few years when some of these things first started getting introduced. So some of the things that you may be very familiar with, speech recognition. How many of you folks have an iPhone? And you talk and you say something, even on Siri. And guess what? Okay, now it asks Siri, and it wakes up and says, hey, what do you want? Alexa, those kinds of things. Speech recognition has been around for a while. It continues to get better. And generally, the more you use it, the better it gets. Language translation. Took a trip over to France. First time I'd been really out of the country for that. And I'm trying to learn French, and I realized that just isn't going to happen very well. So Google Translate is your best friend if you don't know the language. And that is an AI function that's using a lot of different things there that are AI in nature. Security cameras. While maybe not think of that as AI, what it's doing over here, if you see that this is a picture right outside our health center in campus in Omaha. And it's simply recognizing that that image in the photo is a human. And that's all it's doing. And so it's tracking that, and it's recognizing shapes, different types of things. It's going to recognize cars. If I had blown that up, it would recognize and put a little symbol around each of those cars of the parking lot. So it's using AI to process information, try to understand what it's looking at. And there's something, generative AI is really what's getting a lot of the PR these days. And so generative AI, things like Chat GPT, Microsoft Copilot, and Google Gemini. These are what are called large language models. A lot of information out there. You wonder why everybody's building data centers. They're popping up everywhere. It's because of these monsters. They need a lot of infrastructure to be able to work. And right now, these folks are in a big race to see who can be the best and biggest in AI. And it's coming to your neighborhood, and it's related to the battery energy storage systems, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. So when we start talking about intended uses, one of the easiest things, and this has been around for a while too, is this little thing called the chatbot. So sometimes they can be really stinking annoying because they're down there and you're trying to get a question answered. I'm going to pick on the insurance industry because they seem to love these things. And so I click on the little button down there and it says, here, I'm so-and-so. And they try to, the anthropomorphism is kind of odd, but they're going to ask you can ask you questions. So like in this situation, the Douglas County assessor registered deeds wanted a way to get information to the public about taxes, basically real estate taxes and valuations, things like that. And so they created this, it's an experimental chatbot, and it'll come up. And of course, they named it Doug. And this is what comes up. So it tells you, I'm experimental AI, and I'm here to help you get answers about property taxes. So that's one application. So how does a planning and zoning person use it? You just substitute planning and zoning for property taxes, and you build it so that it's looking at your planning and zoning information to be able to answer questions. This particular chatbot only is directed to the Douglas County website that deals with property taxes. So that's all it's looking at for when it's trying to get answers. So if you ask it, what's the capital of South Dakota? It's just going to sit there and kind of don't have that answer because it's not looking outside the county's website. And that's one of the things that I think if you take anything away from this, understand that AI can be a really good tool and it can be your worst nightmare. Because if you don't know where the information is coming from that's feeding the AI tool, that's a big problem. So that gets me to this is a big issue. How many of your jurisdictions have an artificial intelligence policy? Okay. Douglas County realized that about a year ago that, we kind of need to do something here. So one of the commissioners, Chris Rogers, put together a committee basically of all the county department heads and elected officials and say, hey, we need to start developing this policy. And the reason the policy is important is that you have a number of different pieces of, now, let me see, let's just call them considerations. So we have one, and it's a big one, who owns the work product? So if you're going to use Chat GPT or Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, and you're going to say, okay, tell me who has a confined animal feeding operation in the state of Nebraska, or whatever the question is. And you hit go and it crunches all the data, it comes back and gives you a report. So you own that now. And the question is that a public record? So that's a question for your county attorney. If you don't really know, then that's a question you ought to be asking yourself. Because if you and your staff are using one of these AI tools, you need to know how your county legally is going to handle that work product, because now it could be a public record and it could be discovered. And so that gets me, I'm going to skip the copyrighted material, go down to data privacy. So, all of us in the room have probably been in a conversation with the county attorney, and we have a confidential conversation about an issue. And that is a attorney-client protected conversation, and it's not discoverable per se. So how does AI come into this? You don't want to get into a situation where you have a confidential conversation that now somehow gets out in the AI realm, and now you've compromised your legal confidentiality piece. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's probably the biggest aha moment that I had about a year ago, when the county attorney who's sitting in the room said, well, not so fast, because we have these data privacy issues. And if we have a attorney-client privilege conversation, we've got to make sure that that is maintained. Otherwise, you are compromising your liability in a court case. And certainly some of us get into deals with lawsuits over particular planning and zoning applications. We need to make sure that the confidentiality piece is maintained, so that we don't give away that. And that's, we're compromising the taxpayers if we do that. Let me go back to copyrighted material just a minute. And that is important when you are using, let's say, Chat GPT or Google Gemini, and you just ask it an open-ended question. And you're going to get back a lot of stuff. So the more open-ended you make it, the more stuff you're going to get back. And the beauty of some of these is that you can really tell where the sources are of that information. And it's important that you do that, because again, it's your work product. If you are now bringing in copyrighted material into that work product, then you're liable for getting the proper authorizations, etc. So just understand what's being brought into the work product. Bias, the fourth bullet up here. Whether we know it or not, whether we want to admit it or not, we all are imparting bias into the process. So if I'm on my phone and I just happen to like, oh, okay, well, here's something interesting that happened in the world of politics. And it just so happens to be something that's been written by someone who definitely is over on the right. Then just the fact that I'm clicking on that might influence an AI application and skew your results one way. Maybe. So just remember what you're doing on the computer at the time, what your past history might be with that, because you may be introducing some bias. And as I get through in a little bit, we're gonna look at one of the most important things that you can do when you're using an AI tool. And public records, I've kind of touched on that. Again, if you don't have a policy in place right now, you need to have a conversation with the county attorney at least, and just say, hey, how are we going to handle this? If you don't want to compromise their ability to protect the county. Backing up a little bit, a few weeks ago, I sent out an AI survey, and just wanted to kind of give a sense of, well, I had two motives. One was to get a sense of how much folks used AI and kind of how they used it. But the second was, I just wanted to see, I wanted to try out one of the functionalities in Google, because you can use the Google AI tool to create the survey. So that's what I did. So the survey that went out to folks was a AI generated survey. So I get 10 responses back. Excuse me. Thank you for those who feedback. This is non-scientific for sure. But you can see kind of a breakdown of, you know, what do you primarily use AI for? So you can kind of see it here, and most folks are using it to improve the quality of their work output, and then also to just access information. I've noticed, well, for quite a while now, that when you Google anything, or when you use a search engine for anything, first thing that pops up is an AI summary. At least it is for me. And it's a little bit scary at first because you don't really know where it's pulling the information from. So the rule of thumb is, yeah, it's okay to look at that, but verify where it's pulling the information from. That is pretty critical. So in the survey, folks said that they use it to help put together zoning permits, building permits. One person use it to create spreadsheets for my time management, for my payroll purposes. Generating a summary with AI is a lovely thing. I can take a 100-page PDF and run it through Google Gemini or ChatGPT, and it will kick out a summary for me. And the beauty of that is that it's only coming from that one source. And if I trust the source, and I know that this is a verifiable, good piece of, this is a good document, then I feel pretty confident that, yeah, that's a good summary. And I can do that very efficiently when you're looking at legislation, for example. So monster bills that go on and on and on, 90-some pages of like, oh man, I'm not going to be able to go through this. So what you can do with the Gemini tool, for example, which is what I use most of the time, you can say, give me a summary of LB 663. And then I can refine it from there to say, give me a summary of all of the strike through and underline in the bill, because that's the way the bills come out. You've got all this other language that's already existing, and then you've got underlying language that says, hey, we're proposing to add this, and the strike through, we're proposing to get rid of that. And then you can get an assessment very quickly of, yeah, this is worth looking at some more. You'll see when we start looking at the legislative bills being introduced in January, we're going to see some of these things I'm going to use it all the time, simply because it's effective in giving me a snapshot of what's going out there. And when they introduce hundreds of these things, I go through a lot of them, and I'm just looking for a red flag, something that, okay, this is going to influence planning and zoning or solid waste or some of the other things that I'm working with. And then finally, down in the lower right, AI can help you write better. And the one thing that I would caution everybody here is that don't let it replace you. I like to compose an email. I generally will tend to be too verbose and kick the AI on and said, you don't need these words, you don't need these words and these words. And I'll look at that and say, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I like the way that sounds. But there are some stuff there that, while it might be grammatically correct according to the AI tool, I don't like the way it sounds. And it's not me. And somebody who knows me is going to, can't write that. I don't want to get to that point, but it can help you. And if you struggle with composing emails or just correspondence, and especially if you are, let's just say, crucial conversations and things like that, you need to have the right tone. I've been guilty very much. It's like when my boss comes back and said, that email you sent was rather curt. It's not a good thing. So I try to stay away from curt. Remember that conversation very well. Probably won't ever forget it. So also with the survey, I just asked, hey, do you have any questions that you'd like me to cover during the session today? So we had a few questions that came in there. And one of them, it's the validity of the AI set. What's the validity of the thing you're getting back, your work product? So I mentioned LB 663. So I know that if I go And I specifically put LB 663, that PDF that I get from the legislature's website. And I put that in the AI tool and I said, summarize this for me, or maybe asking some more specific questions. I'm saying that's 100% guaranteed. I like that. I like the output. So the validity of AI is dependent upon what you put into it. So if I would say, just, tell me, oh gosh, create whatever open-ended question you want. The AI tool is going to go out there. If you don't specify a particular document that you wanted to look at, it's going to go out there and search the worldwide whatever. And it's going to come back with all sorts of stuff. And when you start looking at the sources that it's pulled, you're going to see stuff like TikTok video, or you're going to see stuff like, a Snapchat post or whatever. And believe me, when you see the social media stuff, you don't want any part of that, because you remember that term bias up there? All of that stuff is biased. You can't verify who said it initially. You can't. Yeah, it's just, even though people will tell you everything on the internet is truth, it's not. So be careful there. That is a big, that's a big red flag. Check.
A great example of that is go in and use ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and ask it what it knows about you. And read what it comes back with. Because it will come back with things that some of them are very accurate, and some of them get conflated with relatives, with other people that it says I'm a teacher as my profession. My dad was a teacher for 30 years. I've seen it come back with those kinds of things, but like you said, if you give it LB 663, and that is the scope of its entire universe that it is looking at, you know that that's all it's like.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the point of Google it yourself. What comes up? Sometimes it's pretty scary. I've seen some stuff come up on me. I thought, I can't even remember that part of my life, but it exists out on the World Wide Web. And as long as it exists out there, there's a potential pathway for an AI tool to go get it. And so that's what, if you remember back early in the presentation, I talked about the chat bot that is only focused on Douglas County's website. That's great. But you know what? If the information on the county website isn't correct or it's outdated, chatbot, it does not know. And so you constantly got to be working on that. And I think you can program, or you can teach the AI tool to only look at the most recent information. I know that that's possible. And again, it's the more you use it, better it gets. So the question someone asked, is AI always listening? Well, as they point out, if you say, hey, Siri's going to be listening. And I can tell you the Zoom AI assistant is listening right now. So it's picking up what's going on in the room. It's picking up the video, and it's surprising how smart it is sometimes, but it's not always listening. It's listening when you tell it. When you tell it, don't have it just running all the time, because if you did that, technically all of that stuff, because we work for the public, starts to become discoverable. And when you have, it's just don't go there. Know when you have it, know when you're using it, know when you've got it on. Siri's great. I like Siri sometimes. Siri's on my way here yesterday, I literally asked Siri where the nearest Starbucks was. I needed some coffee. So the one wasn't, that's not good. So I was in Lincoln at the time. So I said, hey, now give me one that's a little north of there. So Siri then proceeds to give me like a 2135 Lafayette Avenue in Kansas City. I rest my case. Sometimes Siri not very helpful. So, and then the last question I got was, which AI is the best for writing letters? Any of the large language models can help you write, because they're out there searching information wherever they're getting it. So they can certainly help you. They can help you refine correspondence, email, other correspondence you're writing. So they're very helpful for that. But again, don't let it replace your style of writing. It can help you with grammar, it can help you with spelling, and so on and so forth. It helps me be not so verbose, and I appreciate that. So, kind of to kind of review some things, researching in Google Gemini, for example, there's a deep learning type of a function where I can put in fact, I used that as I was preparing for this. In terms of the battery energy storage system piece, I would say, hey, can you give me some basics about this battery energy storage systems, so on. And it pulled some things back, and I kind of went through the sources, and I really didn't use the AI summary, but I used the AI sources that it was pulling from to go and then look there at specific sources, because I wanted to make sure that, one, those sources were credible, and that it really wasn't trying to warp something. You know, as Chad said, okay, yeah, somehow it's looking at my dad instead of me or whatever. So research tool can be very useful, but again, check the source, review what your work product is, and figure out where the statements are coming from. Zoom, excuse me, Zoom AI assistant. One of the things you will get, if you go to that QR code, probably sometime next week, it will show you the transcript of this meeting. And so you can see, since you're all here, you have heard it. Okay, you'll be able to look at the video, and you will also then be able to look at the transcript and see how accurate it is. It is very useful for planning commission meetings. We use it to record the meeting, and then literally 15 minutes after the meeting's done, depending on the length of the meeting, recording will be available, and then the transcript will be available. And then Laura can go through, and it makes it a lot easier, because most of that summary is there. You just have to go in. You'll have to make some edits on names and things like that. But it is very efficient from that standpoint. So with that, remind you that it's a public record, and just make sure that your county attorney advises you on how you are going to retain that. And so that's all I'll say to that. And taking notes. Google Gemini is what I use mostly because we are in the shop in Douglas County. So you can, if I have a Google Meet, Zoom, it's a virtual meeting, then I can turn on that note taker and it will take notes for me. And then it will provide that set of notes, not only to me, but it will provide it to everybody you have in the meeting. Sure, Jeff.
So is that an exact transcript word for word, or it's a summary is what it does? On either one.
It'll do both. Yeah, so the Zoom assistant, you will see, it will give you a summary, and then it will give you notes, and then it will give you literally a minute by minute transcript of what it hears. Now, some of it is going to be, it's going to misinterpret, just like Siri sometimes, but it will give you those options. And I just find it very helpful to go back, and you can really get into the details, like, oh, I don't remember them saying that. You can go back then to the video and verify that, okay, yeah, that's what was said. So I would say as we kind of wrap up the AI discussion here, the AI policy to me is very important, because it helps everyone in the organization understand where the guardrails need to be. A year ago, I was really very naive about the whole attorney-client privilege thing, in fact, that this potentially compromises some of the county's liability. So using AI efficiently and effectively, just kind of know what the limits are. And I think the the big takeaway is you've always got to review what it generates. And if you're going to use AI generated images, for example, you need to make sure that there's some designation on that image that says it was generated by AI. Any questions on any of that? Excuse me. But transition now a little bit to these battery energy storage systems. And again, kind of at the outset, I said, hey, you know, this is some folks have been inquiring about, you know, what would you allow this in your county? You know, the short answer is, well, I don't know. We don't have a regulation that talks about this. So what are we going to do? So let's first kind of look at a definition. And also I wanted to point out that in the QR code, you're going to see this part of the slide deck too, but you're also going to see Lancaster County's BESS regulation that was passed earlier this year. And there's a couple other things. Oh, there's also copies of the Douglas County AI policy and the .com policy, AI policy. .com is our service provider for IT. So those things are there. I forgot to mention that. So lots of resources there. But this is the definition from the Lancaster County regulation. And I just point out a couple of things. One, you know, there's a number of things up there that's in their regulation. But the two terms, associated BESS and standalone BESS. And you will see this coming up in legislation probably this year again. Right now, the law, I believe, is that there has to be an association with the battery energy storage system with either solar or wind or power substation type thing. So there's also a movement to try to get authorization for a standalone battery energy storage system. And that's basically where you could put it anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be adjacent to and associated with some of those wind, solar, or substation type thing. That's a very generic answer. I'll leave it at that. So you'll notice down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's that little Google Gemini symbol there. That designates that this was an AI generated image. And the way I got this, I typed in, I need to see a battery energy storage system that is located next to a solar farm and also located next to a substation. And that's what Google Gemini translated into an image. So endless possibilities of what you could create with AI in terms of an image. But that's kind of what we're talking about right here. Why is this really an issue? Well, I mentioned back a while ago that you've got Google, Meta, Microsoft. They're all competing to try to be the big dog in it with AI. AI takes a tremendous amount of infrastructure. The data centers that are being created around the country have enormous power needs. And so when you're looking at, and this came from a McKinsey data center source, they're looking at the next 5 years, they're estimating that we're going to need 3.5 times the amount of energy to be able to satisfy these needs. It's a lot of stuff. And so how does battery energy storage systems come into play? Well, it comes into play because these companies, Google, for example, they want clean energy. They want renewable energy powering the providing electricity that's coming into their facility. And so if you have wind and solar available, that's great. But there's only so much capacity to go through transmission system. So we need the capability to store some of the energy during times that there's not as much demand, but there's still, solar is being generated, wind power is being generated. Like days like today, I haven't been outside since early this morning. So, but I guess it's really windy out there today. So, we're generating a lot of wind power today, but it's not always coming at the times when we may need it. And there's some economics that play into this as well. If you can store this energy during a non-peak time, it's more economical to do that, and then you sell it back into the grid when at times when it's going to be more expensive, and folks make some money on it. So there's an economic piece in that. But if you're wondering why people are interested in battery energy storage systems, it's because there is a big need for energy. So from a zoning regulation standpoint, and I pull this, I see Chris in the back from OPPD. I wanted to give you credit for he pointed me in the direction of some of his technical folks. And so I wanted to provide kind of a utility perspective from them. And these are some things that they felt were important. Basically, let's site it where it can be efficiently put into the grid, allowing that to be sited in ag areas. Certainly because, the wind and solar obviously are not going to be in a residential district. They're going to be out there where there's room to put that stuff in. Setback requirements. There are certain things that the energy systems require. These are, in some cases, lithium batteries. They need some fire separation. And, those are some things that are in code. And you just want to be aware of those things. Again, all of this slide deck information is going to be available. You just go to the QR code, you can see all these things. So the Lancaster County regulations that were passed earlier this year, not going to spend a lot of time on that because the regulation itself, I did put in with the material. So you'll have that. Excuse me. I believe there's also a reference in there for the person at Lancaster County. And if there's not, I will try to get that put in there. So if you have some questions, you can reach out to them in particular. But I'd say, this would be a good starting point. This may not be ideal for your particular county, but I think it's a good starting point. Those of you that know David Levy, who does a lot of training for NPCA and APA. He was part of this. I had reached out to David just simply because I wanted to kind of get his sense of kind of where he thought this regulation was. And he thinks it's a pretty good regulation. David is in that unique position where he represents developers. He also is the chair of our planning commission. So he sees both sides of the table here. And I trust his judgment on a lot of stuff. And this is something that I think is it's a good starting point. I'll leave it at that. They have some sound requirements in here too. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I just wanted, for the sake of illustration, that these are some of the things that are important to address in the regulation.
So my question,
Oh, yes,
go back one,
yes.
who regulates it?
Who regulates it?
This. Who's gonna go out there and do the decibels?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, it's always, who's going to regulate? Who's going to go out there? I can tell you, from Douglas County standpoint, we're going to wait for a complaint. And then we're going to go out and say, hey, we're getting some complaints about this, and see if we can get voluntary compliance, assuming that they are actually out of compliance. So I would say that's probably the way we would handle it. I don't know that that's ideal, but yeah, who's going to enforce this? That's the question. Yes.
Is there a need to be something on there what they have for a fail-safe system, that it doesn't overcharge those batteries and have problems, because we're gonna have 70-mile-an-hour winds and stuff. What's their governing ability and how do they discharge solar panels when those deals are full, and they're not uploaded? You know, when can that fall in?
Well, I think you're gonna see that as part of the codes. There are gonna be stuff in the code that they need to meet. And I believe those are the things that I think as a zoning authority, you really don't want to get in the weeds on that. You want to have them reference the code. And I'm not an expert on what those kinds of things are. So I want to make sure that they are following the code. And if you're having to do a conditional special use permit, that you make reference that, hey, they need to follow all the appropriate regulations and codes.
Do we need to put in regulations for fire suppression, since there's none of these smaller fire departments can afford the equipment to handle that? And it's been stated that they would have somewhere that could come there, but you got a 70-mile-an-hour wind, you have a battery blow, it gets out of this grass, and you can't control it. I mean, it's devastating. We've had several of them over the last 5 years that weren't charged, and they were just oil fields with RV lines.
That is a fantastic question, because as we get into handling the battery issue, that it's been a growing concern. The volunteer fire departments in the rural areas of the state are really going to be stressed to be able to deal with those. And so that's an excellent point. And to that point, when you get these things coming to your county, then you've got to involve the first responders in that discussion. How are they going to do that? Because they need to be, they're the ones who are going to get tasked with dealing with stuff like that. And so have them front and center, have them asking the question, how are we supposed to deal with this?
If the equipment they handle that type of a fire is in Omaha, 3 hours is an awful long time.
Right.
To try to come in, and you got to deal with keeps igniting and keeps, redoing 70 mile an hour, a push, a fire, quite a ways.
That's a public safety issue. Hey, Mr. Developer that's coming in here, how are you going to address this? We don't have the infrastructure to take care of the fire situation. And it's a valid question. And who gets stuck with the bill? Taxpayers do.
And environmentally stuff, it doesn't fit into our scenario.
Yeah, Chad.
I was just gonna clarify, when you say code, we're all dealing with codes. When you say code, you're talking international building code.
Well, there are fire codes.
The fire
others,
codes, right?
Yes. Yes.
The national or international codes
Right.
for fire and building.
Right. Yeah, not the zoning code per se.
Right.
But there's some things there. Most of these are going to be conditional use types of things. So put conditions on it.
And even if your county does not enforce the building codes or the fire codes, those are adopted by the state, and the developer is obligated to follow those. So that just gives you if they're not following them, it gives you the ability to shut them down. If you find out that they're not doing it the way that they're supposed to be to meet state law.
So this is a new and emerging field out there. Most of us do not have battery energy storage systems, specific regulations in our zoning code. So this is something that we need to be looking at. So Douglas County, we will probably, I don't know how many of these potentially might get cited there, but we need to address this, and it's easier to address it up front so that we know here's how we're going to handle this. And you can get elected folks on board. Hey, this is the way we're going to handle it. And so that you're not scrambling when the developer comes and say, okay, I've got a right to purchase this piece of ground. I'm going to put this on it. So what are your regulations? And you're kind of like, I don't know. Kind of thing. Yeah.
I was in a meeting yesterday where we were talking with a developer about battery energy storage systems. So this is very
Other questions? Or, yes,
Well, in these small counties, when there's, 3,000 to 5,000 people, you bring one of the big power things in with all the battery. Machinery to put that fire out, if there is a fire, it's pushing, about 2 or 3 million bucks. Then they have to get the phone and pay for that and keep it in storage. These small counties can't
Right.
afford it. There's just no way in heck that they could do that.
Right.
Then you throw on top, having to send in somebody's fire department to be trained. All that stuff has to be considered when you're talking to these people. And I think that needs to be part of the regulation, that they need to supply the energy necessary to put out the fire.
yeah, it's a great point, and, similar to what you were asking right there.
Same county.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Again, there's nothing, make it transparent, say, hey, these are concerns. If you have a fire situation here, we need these capabilities to be able to put it out. We don't have the resources to do that, and so we can't go forward with that. But, no. Other questions?
I have a quick one. Just
Yeah.
how many of these stations are in Nebraska at this time?
I don't know.
We just
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
in the future, but we just had we had a 75 meg battery storage come up. It's a 75 meg solar farm with 75 meg battery storage.
Me,
They
I've been in
helped
conversations
put
with
they
people who are
Levy helped put
looking
together
to do
the
some
regs on
stuff. And right now it is kind of, they're doing their due diligence. But pretty soon, they're gonna be knocking on your door and saying, here's a proposal, we want to get on the planning commission agenda, here we go. So, again, it's Chad, it's timely because this stuff is happening. And we need to be as best prepared as possible. And not sure what all that looks like, but certainly having an understanding of, what these things are and what some of the concerns are going to be. And the fire safety thing is huge.
What about the environmental? When you do have a fire, what's the nickel?
Right.
And lithium and that stuff, when you start putting things to it, the runoff, and then can get into federal waterways. Where we at that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of environmental issues that are related to fires, battery fires. Those of you that might remember I believe it was the January fires in Los Angeles, the Pacific Palisades, or whatever, that the significant amount of toxic smoke and emissions that came off that initially was probably one of the worst aspects of that. Besides the fact that you lost a lot of infrastructure and housing and so on, there was a lot of environmental issues related to that. And then the electric cars and all of the, if you watch the 60 minutes video about the EPA folks going in and having to spend 2 or 3 hours on a single car because of all of the spent batteries that were not actually expended and all of the toxins and everything else that's coming off that. It is a very real issue. The lithium ion batteries are a particular culprit just because of that chemistry. And shameful plug, if you go by the exhibits out there, we have the Nebraska Recycling Council, SWANA, Solid Waste Association of North America booth out there, but we're talking about kind of some of the battery issues and get just some resources from that as well. But it's somewhat related.
I know the fire department's brought it up, maybe that if they find a, battery operated car and it's on fire, they're not even there.
Sure.
Because of the stuff coming off, if they're not equipped, they don't have the chemicals to shut it down, plus what's coming off of it is hazardous to them for breathing. For their
Yes.
personal protection stuff.
Yeah,
They don't have
absolutely.
that in there.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I'm gonna pick on you for just a minute. Jeff is manager of Loop Central Landfill, Illinois, which is what, hour and a half north of here or so. Tell him about kind of the battery fire. I mean, just at his point about toxic smoke and stuff like that, and what potentially you have to deal with.
We
generally almost experience a fire at the landfill daily from a lithium ion battery. As a rule, it could be a cell phone, a laptop, a hoverboard, a DeWalt battery for a drill. It's constant everyday battle that we deal with. And when that battery component is jeopardized and it exposed to the outside element, it's 800 to 1200 degrees instantly. So what we've found that, you know, we're not dealing with a car battery or the large quantity battery, but even the small little, the e-cigarettes, the little kids' shoes, if you have grandkids, when you walk, they blink, lithium ion battery. So what we're finding is the bulk of the things that we are encountering in the daily working face of the landfill, that lithium is a small amount. It's spent very quickly, but it is so hot that the existing trash around is on fire. So it doesn't make it a safer environment for a small power tool battery versus a large power tool battery. But those are things that we battle daily in the landfill setting just to try to keep from burning the trash.
So
So
my deal is to produce that lithium battery, how much non-green things and energy went in to produce that, and we're
Yep.
still fighting it
Yep.
on the end of life or whatever in the deal. So where's our net savings in green energy or alternative energy? How's that balance out when you take plus and minus it?
There's some things related to the battery, state battery collection and recycling act that got passed this past session. That will start helping some of that problem, but it's still going to exist. One thing I did want to point out that's going to be somewhat related, well, it's going to be very related to your question here about fire safety and so on. There is a group in Lincoln, the landfill manager there is initiating a group that's talking with mainly with first responders and fire department and so on about the messaging about how we ought to be handling some of the battery fires and so on. And so on the QR code, my contact information, if you would provide me with your contact information, and that goes for anybody in the room, email me and I can get you connected with that group so that we can hopefully get a consistent message for how fire departments need to handle those things.
Because I know the
across
fire
state.
departments are talking to each other. I mean, that's their conversation.
We assume they are, but we want to make sure that they get the right message out there.
Well, when our guys have had, 300,000 acre fires, that it was crossing, highways,
Mhm.
and, 4-lane places and, to the point of, there's lost life.
Yeah.
And things, and it was moved so rapidly.
Yeah. Question.
So hypothetical. So you have a solar farm, CUP, conditional use permit with the proposed BESS on site. And you require as a condition of approval. Most likely, and you require as a condition of approval. That they have mitigation response for fire due to lack of availability. From the rural fire department.
Why not?
Can and did.
But I mean, I look at it as that
And if they can't meet that, can you deny that same CUP because
Granted, with the
It's a condition.
condition that they do this. Because the county doesn't have that available. And can't afford to put that in. And if they can't afford to do it, then this probably isn't the right place. And you didn't tell them no. You told them yes, but
yeah, that's a realistic condition. We simply can't. They're responsible for that equipment. And if their equipment is going to potentially start a fire that is not going to be controllable by the resources that the community has, that's a problem. And so, yeah, why not?
talk to your attorney about that.
But yeah,
So I know I've been in the commissioners meetings with Jen before, but is there social media out there about this? People know about the battery operated cars and a computer usually,
Mhm.
but they don't know about the tennis shoes or a watch
Yeah.
battery or what is there someplace we can go to help promote this knowledge?
there is some of the resources here. You will find there. And then there are some good reputable sources out there, some of the associations, especially the represent the waste industry and the I'm going to call it the rechargeable battery group. This is all of Eveready and Duracell and the other manufacturers. And so as we get good fine messaging out there, that's going to be pushed out. Nebraska Recycling Council, the Keep Nebraska Beautiful affiliates across the state. There's going to be information coming out about that here in the coming year. And hopefully with some grant funding, we are able to kind of kickstart the battery collection network in advance of January 2028. So there's going to be more information coming out on that. We want it to be organized and to the point where we're providing the public an alternative. Because right now there's not enough infrastructure for battery collection and so on. So you don't want to tell people, don't do this, and then not give them any option. So that's being worked out. Yes.
So I don't want to go into rabbit hole here, but
We already.
with the increase that we're going to see, proposed increases that we're going to see with batteries, and the efforts being placed on recycling and collection. Where's the hole being dug to place these batteries in?
Yeah, the short answer is that the goal is that they are not being placed in a hole. They are, so, yeah. No, the intent is that they are not going in a hole in the ground. They are going to a recycler to help reclaim the metals and then to reuse the metals, especially the rare earth metals like lithium, maybe, those types of things, because a lot of those come from overseas. That is a potential national security related issue as well. And so the more we can recycle and reuse those materials here, then we're not dependent upon, let's say, those materials coming from China or a very unstable country somewhere else. That's the reality. You're starting to see legislation and movement in that direction for more reclamation of critical metals. So Call to Recycle is the national nonprofit that deals with a lot of battery recycling. They are required in states, and they will most likely be the stewardship organization in Nebraska in January 2028. They are required to have basically a path of, where's the battery going? And it's going to a sorter, it's going to a processor, it's going to a recycler. They have to document that and provide that information as part of the law.
So like, cool. That's very important.
Yeah. And labeling, you're going to see much of that coming out too. So labeling is a mess on batteries. Most of most of a lot of the problem with lithium ion batteries is it looks like a AA battery. If you look at the battery pack in a Tesla, there are hundreds of these things soldered together in sequence. That's what it looks like. But when one of those burns up, it's just the thermal runaway from one igniting the next one, and that's dangerous stuff. Question over here. Yeah.
What's the lifespan on the BESS batteries, like decommissioning? Is that in the Lincoln Plain tester? Do they have a new decommissioning?
That I don't know. That is certainly any of these kinds of infrastructure facilities gotta have some kind of decommissioning process. Like what's okay, it's got a 10-year lifespan or 20 or 50 or whatever. What are you going to do? Because you don't want to be stuck cleaning the thing up.
Does Lancaster have a decommissioning?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But
State statute.
But you can, you'll see the entire regulation there, and you can kind of go back from there. Other questions? Yes.
Well, to take us back out of the rabbit hole slightly,
Okay.
as a county commissioner, we got a solar project proposed in our county. as a fire chief, I will say, being allowed to drop into the planning and zoning meeting. This is a very fluid situation. And it, just in the light of the conversation, this is very new. And I would encourage everyone to be on top of this constantly, because this is something that's going to need to be added to your regs every 6 months. You need to look at it. What's new, what, and it's going to take a group effort. I mean, this is all brand new to us, so we're just trying to figure this out. I mean, this is eye opening. We've got 120 megawatt battery system coming in top of solar farms. So, yeah, so our plan is to put it on the edge of the fire district, so when it does light up, it's somebody else's problem. That's how I think.
The AI assistant just now through that. That's
My county attorney is not here.
That's Steve Tucker, STE.
Oh, great. Yeah, Chris, but that was, that was kind of going to be to that point. And even to Ken's question earlier of, how many batteries or, battery arrays do we have in Nebraska right now? The answer is probably not too terribly many. I mean, an LTPD system, we have a kind of a pilot battery array that's truthfully very small, just to see how it interacts with our grid. We've explored other possibilities for, where they could in the future be implemented, but it's ultimately an emerging technology. It's something that it's much easier to take your time, learn, to attend these sessions, speak to developers, and get a good baseline in place so that when it's proposed, you've got your ducks in a row and it's not a contentious public topic. So that's where what we're kind of encouraging is we're seeing them with the wind turbines or the solar arrays if they're proposed in your county. So just make sure as you're developing those ordinances, that's where we want the BESS regulations are good to have in there as well as that kind of next supplement to checks.
And when you're dealing with public power in Nebraska, remember, those are public entities that have the power of eminent domain, which means that your zoning regulations do not apply to the public power district, not to their contractor, not to a private entity that they may be contracting with. Your regulations clearly apply. And for the power districts, just a reminder, you need to follow floodplain regulations, even though you have the power of eminent domain.
So what I'll say from the public power perspective is, we're going to do our, a lot of times if there's good or reasonable regulations in place, we may not have to follow them, but we're going to want to follow them. That's the benefit of public power is we have a publicly elected board, just like the same citizens that are electing county commissioners are electing our board of directors. So it's not there's public say in all of these matters. We don't want to go in and bulldoze and just build whatever we want, wherever we want necessarily. Sometimes it's, transmission lines is necessary, but for these, there's an opportunity to put, more or less safeguards in place that for the private developers, for the public power as well.
And my experience working with the public power district is that they follow the regulations. If it is at all possible to follow the regulations and achieve what they're trying to do, they're the first in line to do that, but they don't have to. And reminding your commissioners that is not necessarily a bad thing.
And can we just finish with Chad? OPPD just going at it there real quick.
Oh, no, we won't.
When you were preparing and developing, I guess, your county's its regulations or whatever you shared.
Yeah.
Were you a part of that?
No, I was not part of that. Okay. But I know there were a number of folks in Douglas County. We haven't gone down that road. So I'm looking at Laura over there. But if Laura had that on her plate, maybe she doesn't know that yet. But
TikTok.
she doesn't know.
Okay, my question was, what models did you pull from?
I can probably get you that information. Please, yeah, reach out and I can try to find that. Probably point you to the person at Lancaster who you can have it directly from the horse out there.
AI.
Just AI. Okay.
You're not gonna like what AI pulls.
Google search, yeah.
I guarantee that.
Any other?
Are we getting the wagon ahead of the horse? By putting in these systems, probably, it sounds like this BSS deal is the storage is the most critical part, and we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And we don't know how long it lasts. We don't know if it's gonna, if or when it may blow up. And yet we're planting them out there saying, yeah, I think it'll be okay.
Well, good point. Thank you. I got asked this question by a lobbyist earlier today, and I'll take that with a grain of salt, but the lobbyist basically, do you think that this AI is going to be like it's going to be an AI bubble, and at some point it's going to burst? And so right now it's an arms race. Who can build the biggest data centers and who can capture the biggest market share of AI? And so you've got all this stuff going in. You've got infrastructure with huge power needs. And so you've got OPPD and all the other power suppliers scrambling to try to meet that demand. I say that with a smile on my face because I'm glad I'm not your seat. But I think it gets to the decommissioning question there too.
Or does it go to the fact that we throw safety out the window a little bit? Just because those giants are gonna make their money and their bread and butter off of us. What better place than being out here in the middle of nowhere rather than being in suburbs of Sarpy County or Douglas County or Lancaster County, Are we gonna make any more money off of? Probably not. Yeah, but they're saying their big is we're gonna cut property taxes for it. We're gonna pay for the schools. And we're running out of kids in school, but we're still spending a hell of a lot of money for a lot less population.
It's extremely comparable, at least for me, relevant. It's no different than when AOL came online or Yahoo or the Google search engine came online for the first time. They all thought that was going to be a bubble at that time. AI's here to stay. I don't think it's a bubble that's going to, the popularity is going to wane eventually. It's just going to become part of our daily nature. But I agree with you. I think we are in a unique position, especially rural Western Nebraska, that they can come in and say, we're going to use these as our guinea pig sites. And then when it does blow up, we can fix it before we take it to Sarpy or Douglas. In my opinion, they need to start east and move west. But
we're rushing into it. We've been told things over the last, we were going to do the metric system. We're going to have to learn how to do that back late 60s, early 70s.
Thank God we didn't do that.
Well, now they just got it mixed up. Now they want you to bake with it. Bob the recipes on it.
In the back, you have a question.
I'm just gonna explain that probably every one of us has a basic battery energy storage system in our portables. Because we all have battery backups on our computer. So they don't shut down when we lose that data. They're the kind of batteries we talk about. Okay. One of the places you can get rid of these batteries, if you got a DeWalt hand drill that's got a battery, take to Home Depot. They take those batteries. I assume that there are numbers of stores that sell them that actually take them back. So
there are good point. Just to expand on that a little bit, Call to Recycle, the national organization that has a network of Home Depot, Lowe's, Staples, and Best Buy. And generally, they will take them back. You should call them first. But part of the reason that they take them back is that, take back the battery and, now you're going to buy something else from me. And so there's a dynamic as to why they do that.
We do the electronic buyback or not buyback, but collection. And,
right.
We do tire collections. We do green bags. We've got deals that fund those when they can.
Right.
And doing, I mean, there's semi loads by semi loads out of even a small county that
Right.
get filled up that are used computers or VCRs.
And you will see more of
iPod,
that.
robot, vacuum cleaner, I mean, all those things.
You will see more of that in the coming years as the battery bill gets implemented. You will see more of that because there are some mandates right now in the law that says we're going to have a collection event in each county or so on. I mean,
But
there's some
we're
metrics
talking
that-
eggs, we're talking eggs and cabbage as far as size frame or whatever. Batteries are batteries, but I mean, we're multiplying it by 10 or 100 compared to those systems.
Yes,
Can you talk about the environmental impact of the water that's produced in these data centers?
that I can't because I don't know anything about that particular impact. But could certainly find some explanation. Pardon me?
Anybody in here know how they work?
I really don't. I really don't know the dynamics of how those HVAC systems and those things work in the data center itself.
They do it. There's a variety of them. They can be closed loop, geothermal, could be groundwater supply. I came from Fort Worth where people were building them left and right, to the point where housing no longer had water.
Okay. Well, that's another, with the fire suppression, okay, how much water are you gonna need? Can it be supplied? How much power are you gonna need? That be supplied. And all of those things have to be part of it. I know that, I mean, it's like anything that comes through your planning commission. If it impacts fire department, they need to know about it so that they can comment and provide you good information. And so, whichever, whether it's ODB or whoever, yeah.
I think what I would stress to this group that what I've gathered from the comments that you've all made, the notes and the slide deck that Ken has put up there, you guys have the opportunity now to take this back home with you, your information back to your planning and zoning committees. You all have a connection with one another somewhere in this room throughout the state. Kent's going to provide other information to help that. Now is your opportunity to get started on this. We had a comment about this is a fluid thing. This is happening. We have concern about how our community is going to take care of this. How are we going to prevent contamination? How are we going to deal with fires and responses? Chad has voiced the fact, and several of you have, you're on planning and zoning. You have the ability and the authority as a group to make the conditions to allow this to come to your area. Get together, get started on this now. It's going to be here before we know it. Put those things in place. Every one of these comments that everybody in this room had about their concern is massively valid. Put those conditions in there. You do not have to give that individual or company the authority or the right to put that in your area. So I would hope that most of you would get the big picture out of all this. Batteries are scary. I'll tell you that all day long. How we deal with them, nobody knows because it's just something to do. But the group of people in our state are resourceful enough to get together and get this going. And the longer you wait, you're going to be in that situation where you have no answer.
Great segue to, I'm looking over at Sherry, who Sherry graciously distributes emails, questions that come in to the NACO planning and zoning group. And I would encourage you to make sure that you have up-to-date information for the NACO group, because when this is, I think, the initial place where I saw the BESS question come up, said, hey, we got approached by so-and-so, and they're looking at this. We don't have any regulations. Does anybody have this? And so you can use the power of the group. Because somebody out there is working on this. Lancaster County has a regulation right now. Use the group as a resource. And we can help each other solve some issues. We don't want to recreate the wheel. If we can have consistency, that helps a lot. It helps on both development end and the regulatory end. And the power the power supply and so on. I think you'll see that with any material out there, that manufacturers now are realizing that more and more states are going to extended producer responsibility type things that's putting the onus on them. And they want consistency from state to state. I can tell you with the Nebraska battery bill, the law being passed this last year, Nebraska got put on the map. That is now the standard in the country for that kind of legislation. And kudos to the state senator who got that through. She did it the right way. But public safety issue, and those things are critical. And Jeff is a poster child for landfill fire a day, excuse me, type of thing. We've got to get away from that because the taxpayer is having to deal with all that. And we've got enough things to pay for without having to bail out the manufacturers and producers of these hazardous products. So I will step down off my soapbox. Any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
We're rewriting our zoning and planning deals. Granted, windmills, batteries. But there is no place out there to find out what a judge is going to accept or not accept when these companies come in and challenge our setbacks. 5 miles is too much. 100 feet or 1,000 feet, about, it's a little over. How do you know what the examples are that the judge is going to accept when we go to court? NACO's not going to stand behind us. Now that the people that rewrote our zoning and planning because our local board wanted these extreme setbacks. So they're not going to stand behind. So that means the county is going to pay. We've already kicked out $45,000 of money we don't really have. What are we supposed to do? Because the state doesn't have the answer that we can find.
That's a good question. Chad.
There's not a good answer until you have the court case that it determines it.
Who wants to be the first one to have it? I'm sure
Nobody.
we can't afford it.
Right. Right.
When you're making your regulations and you have a file, all these questions and testimonies in favor and against, you keep that because that's that's going to be in your finding a fact when you make this resolution on your setback. It's going to say, how did I come up with 2 miles or 500 feet? Why did I come up with this? It's going to say there why you did. You need to have a why. And then that's going to back your reason.
I would agree with that, but if the consultant you're working with is not comfortable with what you adopted.
We haven't adopted it yet.
But if they're not comfortable with what you adopted, because it's beyond what they would recommend, I think that's a real red flag. That when you get challenged,
I agree.
they're gonna get subpoenaed and they're gonna show up and say, that's not what we wrote, that's what they adopted, and that will be on you. And right, wrong, or otherwise, that will be on the elected officials that made that decision, and they need to live with it and the consequences of it.
What county are you in?
Right.
And those are hard words, and I don't.
No, I agree 100%. But the planning board, they come up with these. Now, we haven't voted on it. It won't come up until February, I think.
The planning commission is there as the planning commission. They are making a recommendation. They are not the final say. And the elected officials who actually adopt the regulations can roll them back and say, no, we're going to go back to this because we think we can defend that.
If there was a place where we could see what the state standard is or
There isn't.
the norm, rather than, this is too much, this is too little.
I don't disagree with you, but there isn't. There isn't a state standard, and depending on the issue, like I talked about in the county board meeting this morning, Grand Island, the standard for wind exposure is a class B. But Grand Island adopts a class C because we're flat. Because our winds are more extreme than the state as a whole. Every jurisdiction is gonna be a little bit different. And it's gonna have slightly different things that maybe it should be. Maybe you need more space in Cherry County than you do in Franklin County.
It's gonna go back to what Steve said earlier about this being fluid. So you need to have a good relationship with your consultant. So if and when those court cases do develop and there's findings of whatever, I don't know,
Judges back.
whatever the judges call it, I don't call it findings of fact.
That's what we call them.
Right. When those orders are officially gavelled into place by the judge, you can go back to your consultant and say, hey, we need to change this because of this. So it is important that you have a good relationship with a consultant, maybe not your current one, but
I have no problem.
And just kind of to wrap up some of that part, what Sherry indicated is critical. When your planning commission is making a recommendation, they have to be finding facts associated with that recommendation going to the county board, county commissioners and so on. So that's important. You know, why did we make that decision? And then back to the other comment I made a few minutes ago about consistency. Because if we all have regulations across the state in every county that are pretty, the setbacks are pretty much the same, with the caveat that, okay, here, this is flat. Our average wind speed is this. Base it on that. Average wind speed is this, and so we're going to adopt this rather than just what everybody else is. But for that reason, and it's based in fact, that is hard to refute. I mean, you made that decision, and like I said, you can roll back. You know, look, it gets challenged. Say, yeah, this is not reasonable, and the judge finds it that way. Okay, fine. An option then is let's roll that back. I mean that.
As far as AI policies, kind of going back to AI, that's so new. How do you begin to write policies for AI? Is there a template somebody's done already?
Yes, on the resource page, I put the Douglas County AI policy there, so you can see that. And then there is our techprovider.com is their policy and guidelines is also there. So you can use those as a starting point and reach out to me. My contact information is there. If you have any questions over either the AI piece or the BESS piece and so on, happy to address any of those. Anything battery related, I would ask you to stop by the booth out there. There are a couple of QR codes on there, in particular for some resources on batteries that will help you kind of with the, kind of the, sure, I think you could, what's the best practice and stuff like that. So there's some information about that. The Nebraska Recycling Council also is asking if you are interested in being a battery collection site, or you have a need in your community for that. There's QR code there. You can go and fill out that information for them, and that'll be helpful as we go forward. Another question back here?
So Nebraska statute 1014.02, section 3 gives the county, whether you're zoned or not, the ability to negotiate a decommissioning agreement with any green power, whether it's wind, solar, whatever. So don't panic if you don't have zoning.
Okay.
Because the alternative is the power review board that's to do it for you.
Okay.
Which may not be a bad idea at some point in time.
Okay.
If you want to create a statute that will work, or a decommissioning plan that will work across the state, that'd be void.
Yeah, that coming out of the legislature, would that give us more teeth in it if we did go to court?
Possible.
If they make it.
I didn't put it in here specifically, but I believe the Nebraska Power Review Board has to approve all of the BESS installations, or is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a particular, I believe I put it in here as well, a particular section of their regulations that applies to battery energy storage system. So that's in your information.
Is that all BESS or just the commercial scale BESS? Because there's a lot of small scale BSSs out there. The railroad has hundreds of them. You know, people with life issues, you know, or they have to have equipment in their houses.
I don't know the answer, the direct answer for that. I think most of what I was presenting today is really the larger scale stuff that looks to connect to the grid to handle, you know, the power, off-peak power to store it and then release it into the grid, that kind of thing.
Cause you can go on Amazon and buy one for your house, you know, and it's how do you regulate that? You throw it in your basement. I know, you know, the zoning never knows you ever got it.
Well, yeah, I guess my one piece of advice there is qualified electrician, follow code. And I know enough about electricity to be dangerous. So yes, I could change an outlet and I don't want to go further than that. But yes, follow code, use the licensed electrician knows what he or she is doing. Those are my prepared remarks. Again, please go to the QR code, bunch of resources there. My contact information is there. Please reach out if I can be of assistance on any of that, the battery related stuff too. Yeah, I've officially reached nerd geek status on battery stuff. So visit our booth out there. Glad to help out when the public is coming.
Much. Thank you. That was great. We're gonna take a 5-minute break and then we're ready to start up again. And we're gonna talk more about solar and wind power actually.